Oh my goodness, this is gonna be rough. Hi everyone, it's Kable here, the internet's stuffiest music nerd. Um, yeah, 2025 is almost over, and honestly, thank goodness, because this year has been kind of rough. Not just for me, but for like a lot of other people, and yeah, I just want the year to be over with. Hence why I feel like I kind of needed to do this video because I guess to like bring closure to the year or something like that. I don't know, but originally I wanted to do like a top 50 albums of 2025, mostly because I've heard a lot of music from this year, or at least a lot more than I usually do, but due to complications and also just me being sick all of a sudden, I decided to trim it down to ultimately a top 15. So hopefully you'll enjoy it regardless. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say. But I do have a few honorable mentions that I want to shout out before I jump into the list proper. One of these honorable mentions is actually what's going to be playing in the background throughout this video, and that is the sophomore full-length album by Gabriel Moon, Flowerhead, which is a very enjoyable slowcore album with some indie tronica elements mixed in for good measure. I'd say if that sounds interesting, definitely give this a listen because it's pretty unheard of in most circles. And I think that's mostly due to the fact that the artist hasn't really done a whole lot of marketing for this project. So, yeah, I don't know what else to add. But, yeah, definitely check this album out. It's pretty great. Next honorable mention that I want to jump right into is this new album from Moron Police called Pachinko. Moron Police are a Norwegian progressive rock group that caught my attention first with their 2019 album A Boat on the Sea, which is just absolute ear candy from start to finish. And while this album isn't as watertight as A Boat on the Sea, it's still cool to see that the band is still playing around with these creative and colorful and catchy hooks throughout this album. And I'd say if you enjoy A Boat on the Sea like I do, there's a lot to appreciate with this new album. 21 Pilots, Breach. I'm kind of surprised that I'm talking about a new 21 Pilots album only a year after they dropped their previous album, because typically 21 Pilots releases albums every 2 or 3 years, but I guess they decided to release this new one a bit earlier than usual. But overall, it's very enjoyable. A lot of great songs like Drum Show. Don't think it's their best. Like, I still think Trench is peak 21 Pilots. But this is still an overall enjoyable listen, and I had to mention it in the honorable mentions section. Outsights, Wave of Revelation. Outsights is the side project of one VMR Robotic, which I don't know if that's how you're supposed to pronounce that name, but whatever. Anyways, VMR Robotic is best known for making this psychedelic, atmospheric drum and bass type of music. They even released a new album this year under the VMR Robotic moniker. However, I think this Outsights album is honestly a bit better, mostly because it plays around with ambient techno more than past releases, and it makes for a very chill out and enjoyable listen. I definitely recommend it if that sounds interesting. Ariel Pink, With You Every Night. Ariel Pink is a huge pioneer to that of hypnagogic pop. He is also quite the controversial figure, not just because of the January 6th attacks, but also because of his online personality being very obnoxious. However, with this new album right here, I think he proves that he can still make some very catchy music if he wants to. Songs on here are very catchy, like I said, and overall it's just a very pleasant listening experience. Not the best Ariel Pink album, but it's reassuring to know that he still has it in him, even despite all the bullshit surrounding his persona. John Mouse, Later Than You Think. It's kind of funny going from Ariel Pink to John Mouse because both are actually pioneers to that of hypnagogic pop, and they're also both controversial for the January 6th attacks that happened back in 2021. However, unlike Ariel Pink, I feel like John Mouse is a lot more reserved online. Like, he said some stupid stuff, but not to the extent that Ariel Pink has. It doesn't really excuse his shitty actions, but I don't know, I just figured I'd point that out. But anyways, with this new album, John Mouse basically just sticks to his guns and makes some very awesome synth pop that is just very catchy and very fun to listen to. Overall, it's just very great, and like with Ariel Pink, it's nice to know that John Mouse still has it in him to make some great music. And the final honorable mention is one that doesn't technically qualify for this list because it's an archival release and it's also like a remaster of sorts, but what I'm talking about is the Pink Floyd Live at Pompeii set, which I just felt like I needed to mention because, if I'm being honest, this is like the best thing that Pink Floyd has done. Every song on here is incredible and honestly superior to the studio versions, and overall there's just a lot of energy behind this set, and it's just awesome to hear, and it's awesome that it's finally on streaming platforms as a standalone release. And yeah, overall, I'm just happy that this exists. With the honorable mentions done and over with, it's time we move on to the list proper, starting it off at number 15 with Adrian Linker, Live at Revolution Hall. I gotta say, if you weren't a fan of the new Big Thief album that dropped this year and you haven't heard this live album from Adrian Linker, I'd say definitely check this out as soon as possible because it is such a unique listening experience. Because the thing with live albums is that I feel like they are typically like either super polished or super messy depending on the quality that you're expecting. However, I feel like this album is kind of, it wears its faults on its sleeve almost. Like, you can hear some audience stuff happening in the background on certain songs. The quality ranges from super hi-fi to super lo-fi. There are a lot of interlude tracks that kind of dive deeper into like the backstory of this live set, I guess. And overall, it just feels very comforting in a strange way. Like, I really enjoyed this album, and I would definitely recommend it if, again, you weren't huge on the new Big Thief album. Number 14, Joanne Robertson, Blur. Joanne Robertson is an indie folk singer-songwriter from the UK, and you might recognize her name because she is a frequent collaborator to that of Dean Blunt. She has appeared on many Dean Blunt albums and has even done a couple of straight-up collab albums with him. However, on this solo album from her, she plays some pretty straightforward indie folk, but I think what really sells it for me is the overall production and overall atmosphere of the project. Like, for the most part, it's just Joanne Robertson and her guitar, maybe some cello here and there, but the resulting sounds is very cavernous sounding almost, and it makes for a very eerie atmosphere. And overall, I just really enjoyed this album. I especially love the opening track on here, as I feel like it sets the overall mood of the album. And yeah, I just had to include it on this list because it is such a strange album. It's soothing, but it's also kind of haunting at the same time. Number 13, Shearling, Motherfucker, I Am Both Amen and Alleluia. Shearling is essentially the continuation of One Sprain, which, if you recall, released an album in 2023 called The Lambeth Effigy, before inevitably breaking up shortly after. Now, Alex Kent, the frontman of both Sprain and Shearling and some other musicians, decided to form Shearling right here. And this album is quite the trip, to put it simply, because it's just one song, it's over an hour long, and it goes through a lot of different phases. Like, some portions are very noise rock, post-hardcore inspired, others have like glitch elements thrown into it, there are other more ambient and drone moments. It's quite the trip, to put it simply. And when I first heard it, I was just beyond flabbergasted by what I heard, because everything about this sounds so manic and chaotic and just all over the place that I didn't know what to think of it. But overall, I think this album is definitely one of the more unique albums that I've heard this year, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is willing to sit through a 60-plus minute long noise rock, post-rock, experimental rock, the behemoth of a track. Number 12, Ethel Cain, Willoughby Tucker, I Will Always Love You. Ethel Cain is an interesting figure in music to me because some of her songs have actually crossed over into the pop sphere, but don't go into this project or really any of her albums expecting a lot of glossy, short pop songs. because her music is very much indebted to the sounds of slowcore and also dream pop and maybe even some post-rock here and there. And overall, there are some songs, like on the previous full-length album, there was like, I think it was American Teenager, that was the big hit. And there's also the song Fuck Me Eyes off of this new album that has some pop-leaning production. But overall, this album is very slow, it's very lethargic, and it's honestly very emotionally heavy. It's a very enjoyable album, and overall, it's just really cool that music like this can cross over to more broader audiences, even if the resulting reactions is a bit more polarizing in the short term. Number 11, Jeffrey Cantu Ledesma, Gift Songs. I already talked about this album on my channel before, as I did a pretty short review of this album, and admittedly this album did kind of grow off of me a little bit. Not that I think it's bad, but I do think that the first half kind of overshadows the second half. But still, I think that first half, specifically the song The Milky Sea, is honestly one of the best songs I've heard all year, if I'm being honest. Not just for ambient, but just for music in general. And overall, I just think it's a lovely track. And the rest of the album is pretty great too, even if I don't think it's up to the same quality as that first song. But still, if you're looking for a great ambient album, I can't recommend this album enough, because it is just absolutely gorgeous and definitely a must-listen if you're a fan of ambient music. Number 10, Tithing at the Mystery's End. So this one is a pretty last-minute addition to the list, mostly because I hadn't heard of this album until I saw Wyatt XM's year-end list, and he put this album as an honorable mention. And seeing as I was someone who was very interested in getting into more neo-folk, I decided to give this album specifically a listen, and I'm really glad that I did, because this is some really great neo-folk overall. The closest thing that I can compare this to is probably like that debut Nature and Organization album, Beauty Reaps the Blood of Solitude. It has a very similar vibe to it, and I just overall think it's really great. It's very lush and very apocalyptic sounding, which is something that I would always like to hear in a neo-folk project. And overall, I don't know if Wyatt XM is even watching this video, but if he is, then I just want to say thank you for bringing this album to my attention, because I really did enjoy it, and I hope more people who are into neo-folk check this out. Number 9, Alex Mulch, Hyacinth. Alex Mulch is an underground indie folk singer-songwriter who has been trying really hard to push his music out to as many people as possible. And it kind of makes me sad, because he hasn't really garnered a whole lot of attention with this album, which is a shame, because I really think this album will appeal to a lot of people if they give it the proper chance it deserves. I think the best way to describe this album is that it's like I said, it's indie folk, but there are portions of it that kind of remind me of Duster almost, specifically the songs Sleep and Blood on the Snow. And overall, I just think this is a very beautiful album. It has a lot of great songs on it, a lot of great melody, and overall, if that sounds interesting to you, then definitely give this album a listen. Number 8, Swans, Birthing. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this album and describe why I feel like this album hasn't really appealed to a lot of people. And I think the biggest reason out of all of them is that for Swans, this really isn't anything new. It's kind of Swans by the numbers to a certain degree. And I would also say that lyrically this album isn't the best. I'm specifically thinking of songs like I Am a Tower, where the lyrics kind of make me roll my eyes a bit. But I think the reason why I really enjoyed this album, despite all of those complaints, is that I just think Swans has a very identifiable sound, at least the modern era Swans does. And I just think they play to their strengths very well. And there are 2 songs on this album that I think are absolutely amazing. And those are the last 2 songs. The first of those being The Merge, which is my personal favorite, as it has a very cool progression to it and a lot of cool soundscapes. And the closing track, Rope Away, is honestly just beautiful as well. I just adore that track so much, and it's a great closer to this album and to the overall loud sound that Swans is supposedly retiring after this album. And overall, it's a really great album. I can definitely see why some people wouldn't really jive with it, but I personally thought it was really great, and I can't wait to see what Swans do next. Number 7, Deftones, Private Music. Deftones are a pretty huge name when it comes to alternative metal. Their blend of metal and dream pop and shoegaze makes for a pretty potent blend, and it's something that a lot of people really enjoy, especially these days. Personally, I've been a huge fan of Deftones for a while, but even despite that, I was a little bit concerned about this new album, given all the controversies and tension that was surrounding this band. But I was pleasantly surprised by this album right here, as it is probably one of the band's better albums overall. Songs like My Mind is a Mountain, Milk of the Madonna, and Infinite Sources are all really amazing songs and up to the quality standards that you would expect from Deftones. And overall, I'm just very happy with this album. I'm glad that Deftones are still making music that's great, at least to my standards. And yeah, I'm just happy that this album is as great as it is. Number 6, Sharp Pens, Balloon, Balloon, Balloon. Sharp Pens is the one-man indie rock project from Chicago, and this is their third full-length studio album, if my memory serves me right. Now, Sharp Pens is a really interesting band. I actually saw him live back in 2024 when they opened for Camping in Alaska. Great show, by the way. But I never really bothered to check out his music until, later this year. As, I don't know, I guess I just got sidetracked by listening to other stuff. But I'm glad that I did check out his music eventually, because it's some really great stuff. It's pretty lo-fi. It's very much indebted to bands like Guided by Voices and maybe Cleaners from Venus, if you know that group. Now, this new album right here definitely leans into the Guided by Voices influences a lot harder, which may deter some people, as I feel like their previous album, Radio DDR, was more unique sounding overall. But I think this new album right here still has the great songwriting and overall catchiness that you would want from Sharp Pens. And overall, I just think this album's really great, and one of the reasons why it's landing so high on this list. Number 5, Geese, Getting Killed. I'd say that out of all the bands that I'll be talking about this video, Geese is without question the one that exploded the most in the music nerd circles, I'd say. And I'm going to be honest, I think the hype is absolutely deserved, as this group plays around with indie rock and art rock, and also elements of maybe blues and crowd rock even, I'd say. But they blend it so well that it kind of makes for a very unique sound overall. They're definitely indebted to bands of the past, but they definitely put their own twist on it. Especially with Cameron Winter's vocals, which sound pretty manic and also very, I don't know how to describe his vocals exactly, but they are very infectious. And lyrically, I think this album is pretty great too. I especially love the closing track, Long Island City, Here I Come, specifically for that reason. It just goes on into these tangents of sorts, and I just absolutely love this album. It's honestly, like I said, I think the hype is deserved, and I definitely can't wait to see what this group does next. Number 4, Dijon, Baby. Dijon is an R&B producer, singer, songwriter. And he's had a pretty productive 2025, as he produced not only the new Bon Iver album that came out this year, but also the new Justin Bieber album that dropped this year. So you'd think that his overall style is pretty polished, given how he's worked with big names like that, but when you listen to this album, you'll find that it's actually pretty sporadic and also kind of glitchy at points. It's also pretty minimalistic overall, I'd say, and honestly, I know this album's not going to appeal to a lot of people, as it is very eclectic, I guess, is one way of describing it. But personally, I think this album is amazing. I really love the overall production and feel of the album. Dijon is a very captivating vocalist, and overall, I just really enjoyed this album. I don't know what else to add. I just really enjoyed it. Number 3, Nourished by Time, The Passionate Ones. I'd say that both Nourished by Time and Dijon have similar characteristics on the surface, as both are pretty DIY producers, and they both have some influences from R&B music, but where Dijon is a lot more minimalistic in its approach, Nourished by Time feels a lot more lush and, dare I say, maybe even grandiose at points. Like, you listen to songs like 9 to 5, or Baby Baby, or the closing title track, and they just feel very full and also kind of psychedelic at points. And overall, I feel like these two albums can kind of swap places depending on the day, but I ultimately put Nourished by Time at number 3 because I just feel like it's an overall fun time to listen to. And I also feel like that of the two albums, this Nourished by Time album is probably the more accessible overall. But yeah, overall, both are great albums, but I just prefer the Nourished by Time album just by a little bit. Number 2, Sunrise Flower Field, Dreams at Snowland. Sunrise Flowerfield is the collaborative project between Sam LRC and Bozru Bear, and honestly, this was my album of the year for a good while, as I feel like this album is just quite the odyssey to listen to. It's pretty experimental. It plays around with like electroacoustic music and ambience and post-rock, and there's even like one portion in the first track that has like some post-metal being played, which is pretty cool. And overall, it just feels very spiritually affirming, I guess, is one way of describing it. Like, everything about this album just feels like it was meant for someone like myself who really enjoys these weird landscapes of sounds and textures and overall moods. It's a very beautiful album. I can't guarantee everyone's going to enjoy it. Like, if you go into this album expecting like another Lonely Sinner or something like that, you're going to be in for quite the shock, because that is not that. But overall, I just really enjoy this album, and I would definitely recommend it if you enjoy either of those artists' works overall. And my number 1 album of the year is going to go to Miffle with Goodbye World. Miffle is an artist from Poland, and this is their debut full-length album. It came out back in September, but I didn't hear about it until like late November when Fantano decided to review it on his channel, and he reviewed it quite positively. And I know that we're not supposed to like take what Fantano says like super seriously, but I decided to give this album a listen because it was in the style of tape music, which is a genre that I wasn't really expecting Fantano to cover like at all. And also, it just seemed very interesting, and I decided to give it a spin for myself. And wow, this listen is quite the it's quite the devastating listen, as this album is dedicated to Miffle's best friend who passed away back in 2023, I think, or something along those lines. And basically, this album is trying to replicate this sound of something that you want to happen but can't happen because it'll never happen. Or maybe it's like this sound of like trying to recapture the past but unsuccessfully. And overall, like sonically, this is a tape music album, as there's a lot of tape manipulation and ambience, and it's quite the enticing listen. And I, for one, really enjoyed it. I don't know if this will be my album of the year for, like, the future, because I will admit when I first heard it, I was in a not really all that good of a mood, and I guess hearing something this depressing kind of made me fall head over heels for it. But even if that's not the case, I do still think this is an incredible album, and I think everyone who is interested in tape music or just, like, weird forms of ambient music overall should definitely check this album out. And yeah, that is basically my top 15 albums of 2025. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you all found some interesting music with it, and if not, then I hope you all enjoyed it regardless. If you want to share your top 10, 15, whatever albums in the comments below, feel free to do so. And yeah, this has been Kable, and I will see y'all next year. Bye.